7-year-old Sophie Carter ate 3 bites of dinner that night, 3 bites that saved her life. Because while she was picking at her food, her mother Melissa was watching her husband David convulse on the living room floor, his body violently rejecting the antifreeze she'd mixed into their meal. She was watching 12-year-old Joey vomit blood all over himself, crying for help. And Melissa Carter sat perfectly still on that couch, arms crossed, waiting for them to die. Sophie begged her mother to call 911. Melissa looked at her dying daughter and said nothing. For 23 minutes, she let her family suffer in agony while she planned what she'd tell the police. When investigators found Melissa's computer, they discovered searches for how much antifreeze kills a person and symptoms of antifreeze poisoning. But the most chilling thing they found was a text message to her lover. "They won't be in my way much longer." The woman who was supposed to protect them had become their executioner. And the only reason we know this story is because Sophie Carter survived to tell it. What do you think drives a mother to poison her own children? Drop your thoughts in the comments because this story is about to get so much darker. Spring 2008 in suburban Roswell. Georgia looked like the American dream. Tree-lined streets, manicured lawns, families who waved at each other from their driveways. The Carter family seemed to fit right in. David Carter, a hard-working electrician, his wife Melissa, a stay-at-home mum, and their children, 12-year-old Joey, who loved baseball, and 7-year-old Sophie, who collected stuffed animals. But behind the white picket fence at 1247 Maple Street, Melissa Carter was living a lie. Multiple lies, actually. She was having an affair with her personal trainer, Maxwell Henry. She'd been forging David's signature on credit cards, racking up nearly $40,000 in secret debt. When David's paycheck hit their joint account, Melissa would immediately transfer most of it to her personal spending account that David didn't know existed. David's sister, Linda Carter, later told investigators that David had confided in her just weeks before his death. He said Melissa was acting strange, cold, like she was planning something, but he couldn't figure out what. The neighbors started noticing things too. Margaret Phillips, who lived next door, said Melissa would stand at her kitchen window for hours, just staring at David when he came home from work. It wasn't the look of a loving wife, Margaret testified. It was the look of someone studying their prey. In March 2008, David confronted Melissa about the affairs and the money. Their neighbor heard shouting through the walls that night, David demanding answers, Melissa screaming that she didn't owe him anything. The fight ended with David threatening divorce and custody proceedings. That same week, Melissa's internet search history shows her first query. What household chemicals are poisonous? But what no one knew was that Melissa had already started testing the poison on her own dog. The family's golden retriever, Buddy, died mysteriously in early April. The vet said it looked like kidney failure, but couldn't explain why such a young, healthy dog would just collapse and die. Melissa had the dog cremated immediately. No autopsy, no questions asked. She was practicing, learning exactly how much antifreeze it would take, how long the suffering would last, and she was getting excited about it. Her lover, Maxwell Henry, later testified that Melissa seemed giddy when she talked about sweet drinks that could hide bitter tastes. She'd bring him iced tea when he came over, always insisting he drink it all. Maxwell thought she was just being a good hostess. He had no idea he was dating a woman who was perfecting the art of murder. You've already seen how dark this story is becoming, and you're still here. Don't just watch silently. Subscribe so families like this are never forgotten, because what Melissa Carter did next will haunt you forever. April 15, 2008. A Tuesday night that started like any other in the Carter household. David came home from work at 6:30 p.m., tired and hungry. Joey was finishing homework at the kitchen table. Sophie was playing with her dolls in the living room. Melissa announced she was making everyone's favorite dinner, spaghetti and meatballs with her special sweet tea recipe. She'd been planning this meal for 3 weeks. That afternoon, while David was at work and the kids were at school, security cameras from the nearby Walmart captured Melissa purchasing 2 bottles of antifreeze. She paid in cash. She told the cashier she was having car trouble, but investigators later confirmed her car was running perfectly. At 7:15 p.m., the family sat down to eat. David noticed the sweet tea tasted different, stronger somehow. Melissa insisted it was a new recipe she wanted to try. "Drink up," she told them. "I made extra." Sophie, always a picky eater, only managed 3 small bites of spaghetti and a few sips of tea. Joey, trying to please his mother, finished his entire plate and drank 2 full glasses. David, exhausted from work, ate quickly and drained his tea in one go. Melissa didn't touch her food. She claimed she'd eaten while cooking. Within 30 minutes, David started feeling dizzy. By 8 p.m., he was stumbling to the bathroom, nauseous and confused. Joey began vomiting in the kitchen sink, crying that his stomach felt like it was on fire. And Melissa? Melissa calmly cleared the table, putting the leftover poisoned food down the garbage disposal and washing every dish by hand. At 8:47 p.m., David collapsed in the living room. His body went into violent convulsions, foam pouring from his mouth as the antifreeze attacked his nervous system. Joey crawled to the couch, blood streaming from his mouth, begging his mother for help. Sophie, still conscious but starting to feel sick, ran to her mother. "Mommy, call 911, Daddy needs help." Melissa looked down at her dying husband, then at her son, who was choking on his own blood, and she sat on the couch, arms crossed, waiting. For 23 minutes she watched David convulse and Joey suffer. Sophie later testified that her mother seemed calm, like she was watching TV. At 9:10 p.m., when David had stopped moving and Joey had gone silent, Melissa finally picked up the phone. But not to call 911. She called her lover, Maxwell, first. "It's happening," she whispered into the phone. "They're dying." Maxwell later told police he thought she was having a mental breakdown. He begged her to call for help immediately. At 9:23 p.m., 36 minutes after David first collapsed, Melissa Carter finally dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency? "My husband and son. I think they ate something bad. They're not responding." The operator could hear Sophie crying in the background, begging for her daddy to wake up. Paramedics arrived at 9:31 p.m. David Carter was already dead. Joey Carter died en route to the hospital, his small body unable to fight the massive dose of ethylene glycol poisoning. But Sophie was still breathing, barely conscious, but alive. The 3 bites that saved her life were about to expose her mother's monstrous secret. At Gwinnett Medical Center, Dr. Kate Pordoza immediately suspected poisoning when she saw Sophie's symptoms. Rapid heartbeat, difficulty breathing, but most telling, the sweet smell on her breath that's characteristic of antifreeze ingestion. Blood tests confirmed what Dr. Martinez feared, ethylene glycol levels that should have been fatal. Sophie had ingested enough poison to kill an adult, but her small appetite that night had saved her life. When Detective Mike Torres arrived at the hospital, he found Sophie drifting in and out of consciousness, but coherent enough to answer basic questions. Her first words were haunting. Mommy wouldn't call the ambulance. She just watched Daddy shake. While Sophie fought for her life in the pediatric ICU, investigators were methodically tearing apart the Carter home. In Melissa's bedroom, hidden inside a hollowed-out romance novel, they found a notebook filled with meticulous planning that read like a murder manual. Page after page of calculations, timelines, and contingency plans. D, 185 lbs, approximately 4 to 6 hours for complete organ failure. J, 95 lbs, approximately 2 to 3 hours, may need additional dose. S, 65 lbs, 1 to 2 hours maximum, use half portion to avoid suspicion. She'd researched the lethal dose of ethylene glycol based on body weight, cross-referenced it with medical studies she'd found online, and even factored in their individual eating habits and metabolisms. David's page included notes about his blood pressure medication and how it might affect his body's ability to process the poison. But it was Melissa's computer that revealed the true scope of her planning. The search history read like a blueprint for the perfect family murder. How much antifreeze to kill someone? Signs of antifreeze poisoning symptoms. Do hospitals test for antifreeze in blood work? How to hide the bitter taste of antifreeze in food? Life insurance payout for accidental death versus murder. Can antifreeze be detected in autopsy? How long does antifreeze stay in system after death? Best sweet drinks to mask chemical taste. The searches spanned 4 months, showing Melissa's methodical research process. She'd even joined online forums for veterinarians and poison control specialists, asking hypothetical questions about accidental poisonings and treatment protocols. The most chilling discovery was a folder on her desktop labeled New Life. Inside were apartment listings in Tampa, Florida, job applications under the false name Miranda Collins, and a detailed budget showing exactly how she planned to live off David's $250,000 life insurance policy. She'd already researched schools in Florida for Sophie, apparently planning to keep her surviving daughter as cover for her new identity. But what broke the case wide open were the text messages to her lover, Maxwell Henry. Hundreds of messages spanning 3 months, documenting Melissa's transformation from unfaithful wife to calculating killer. The messages showed her growing obsession with eliminating what she called obstacles to their relationship. March 15th. David knows about us. He's threatening to take the kids and leave me with nothing. March 22nd. What if something happened to them? Would you wait for me if I had to start over? March 28th. I keep thinking about how peaceful it would be, just you and me. No complications. April 3. I've been researching permanent solutions. Some problems can't be solved with divorce. April 8. The dog experiment worked perfectly, much easier than I thought. April 12th. I know exactly how to do it now. Sweet tea masks everything. April 14th. Tomorrow changes everything. They won't be in my way much longer. By Wednesday, we can be together without hiding. The messages also revealed that Melissa had been slowly poisoning David for weeks before the final deadly dose. She'd been adding small amounts of antifreeze to his coffee every morning, just enough to make him feel tired and weak, but not enough to cause obvious symptoms. He's been so tired lately, she texted Maxwell on April 10th. Poor thing can barely keep his eyes open after dinner. I told him he should see a doctor, but men never listen. Detective Torres confronted Melissa at the hospital while Sophie was still in the ICU, connected to machines that were keeping her kidneys functioning. The interrogation lasted 4 hours in a sterile conference room, and Melissa never once asked about her daughter's condition. Not once. Mrs. Carter, we found antifreeze residue in your kitchen. I don't know anything about that. We have your search history, Melissa. You researched how to poison your family. That's not illegal. People research lots of things. Your husband and son are dead. Your daughter is fighting for her life. Things happen. People get sick. When Detective Torres showed her the text messages to Maxwell, Melissa's mask finally slipped. Instead of breaking down or showing remorse, she became cold and defiant. They were weak, she told investigators. David was holding me back. The kids would have grown up to hate me anyway. I gave them a peaceful death. Peaceful? Detective Torres pressed. Your son died vomiting blood. Melissa shrugged. Better than what life had planned for them. Would you have caught the signs? Could you have believed this quiet suburban mom was capable of murder? Because the evidence was overwhelming, but Melissa Carter still had one more shock for everyone. She planned to claim Sophie was lying about everything. If you're still watching at this point, you're different. Most people would have clicked away. Prove you're not like everyone else. Hit subscribe, share this video, and keep these victims' voices alive. Because Sophie Carter's testimony is about to reveal something even more disturbing. Melissa Carter's trial began 8 months later, in December 2008. The prosecution had overwhelming evidence: the internet searches, the text messages, the notebook with calculated death times, and the antifreeze residue found throughout the Carter home. But they also had something more powerful. They had Sophie. At 8 years old, Sophie Carter became the youngest witness to testify in a capital murder case in Georgia history. The courtroom was packed as this tiny girl, still recovering from organ damage caused by the poisoning, took the stand against her own mother. District Attorney Rachel Morrison led Sophie through her testimony with incredible gentleness, but the details were devastating. Sophie, do you remember what happened the night your daddy and Joey got sick? Yes, Mom. Mommy made dinner and said the tea was special. What happened after dinner? Daddy started shaking really bad. Joey was throwing up blood, I asked Mommy to call the doctors. What did Mommy do? She sat on the couch. She looked at Daddy shaking and didn't help him. The most heartbreaking moment came when the prosecutor asked Sophie to identify her mother in the courtroom. This 8-year-old girl who had lost her father and brother, who had nearly died herself, had to point at Melissa Carter and say, "That's my mommy who made us sick." Melissa showed no emotion. She sat perfectly still, taking notes, occasionally whispering to her lawyer. Several jurors later said they'd never seen anything so cold. The defense argued that Melissa was having a mental breakdown, that she couldn't have planned such a calculated murder. They claimed the internet searches were research for a novel she was writing, that the text messages were taken out of context. But they couldn't explain away Sophie's testimony. They couldn't explain why Melissa waited 23 minutes to call 911, and they couldn't explain the notebook with death time calculations. Dr. James Patterson, a forensic psychologist, testified about family annihilators, parents who kill their entire families. Melissa Carter fits the profile perfectly, he explained. She felt trapped in her marriage. She was about to be exposed for her lies and affairs, and she saw her family as obstacles to the life she wanted. These killers often show no remorse because they genuinely believe they were justified. In Melissa's mind, David and the children were preventing her from being happy, so they deserved to die. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours, guilty on 2 counts of first-degree murder, guilty of attempted murder of a child. The judge sentenced Melissa Carter to life in prison without the possibility of parole. As the verdict was read, Sophie sat in the front row with her Aunt Linda, who had become her guardian. Witnesses said Melissa turned to look at Sophie one last time before being led away in handcuffs. She mouthed the words, "I'm sorry." Sophie looked back at her mother and whispered to her aunt, "She's not sorry, she's just sorry she got caught." An 8-year-old child saw through her mother's manipulation better than anyone else in that courtroom. Today, Sophie Carter is 23 years old. She's changed her last name and lives quietly in another state. Through her aunt, she released one statement about her experience. "My mother took away my father and my brother. She took away my childhood and my ability to trust people completely. But she didn't take away my life and she didn't take away my voice. I hope my story helps other people recognize when someone they trust is actually dangerous." The Carter case became a turning point in how law enforcement investigates family annihilation cases. The detailed digital evidence, search histories, text messages, online purchasing records, created a blueprint for prosecuting similar crimes. But perhaps more importantly, it highlighted how domestic killers can hide in plain sight. Melissa Carter wasn't a stereotypical monster. She was a suburban mom who attended PTA meetings and baked cookies for school fundraisers. Her neighbors described her as quiet and polite. Her children's teachers said she seemed like a devoted mother. The warning signs were there: the financial deception, the affairs, the sudden coldness toward her family. But they were subtle enough that most people missed them until it was too late. Sometimes the danger isn't outside your home. Sometimes it's across the dinner table, smiling at you while planning your death. Understanding the psychology behind cases like this is exactly what drove me to write The Killer's Mind, Psychology Behind Shocking Murders. In it, I dive deep into what creates family annihilators like Melissa Carter and how to recognize the warning signs before tragedy strikes. I've also compiled 7 of the most disturbing cases that were too graphic for YouTube in Too Disturbing for YouTube, 7 Shocking Murder Stories. Both books cost less than a coffee, but could change the way you see the people around you. Links are in the description below. Sophie Carter survived for a reason, so her family's story wouldn't die with them. David and Joey Carter deserve to be remembered as more than just victims. They were a father who worked hard to provide for his family, and a 12-year-old boy who loved baseball and always tried to make his mother proud. Their deaths weren't random, they weren't accidents. They were the calculated result of one woman's selfishness and her complete lack of human empathy. This daughter survived for a reason, so her family's story wouldn't die with them. The least you can do is subscribe right now and share their story. Don't be a ghost viewer. Let their lives mean something. Join my insider community for cases too disturbing for YouTube. The link is in the description. These stories matter. These victims matter. And I'll leave you with this final question that'll keep you up tonight. Would you still sit down at the dinner table if you knew the cook had secrets this dark? Comment below and let me know what you think about the Melissa Carter case. And remember, sometimes the person you trust most is the one planning to hurt you. Until next time, stay safe out there.